Pilate proclaimed the power of empire. And that is our image for today and what we will be looking at. But again, we're going to talk about, and Mary Beth, if you can get the PowerPoint up, that'd be great. There we go. And what we're going to talk about today is what is this concept of community? And how vital is the idea of social connection to our well-being, not only as individuals, but in the broader sense of our relationships with each other, especially in today's polarized society. On this Palm Sunday, as the season of Lent moves toward Holy Week and Easter, we'll explore the dynamic tensions that exist between togetherness versus alone, alone versus loneliness, community versus isolation, and quiet and stillness versus chaotic and disruptive, all through the lens of the gospel narratives of Lent. Can I do this, Mary Beth, or do you need to advance them? There we go. When Margaret and I first started talking about this, we both came upon or remembered coming upon the iconic book by Robert Putnam called Bowling Alone. The initial publication came out in 2001, and it was right around the time of 9/11. And Bowling Alone became somewhat iconic relatively quickly, and for very, very different reasons, because his basic premise was one that was argued by people that said, oh, no, it can't be that bad, or it's not that bad, or he was criticized for being very, very much too negative, when in reality, he was trying to affect a balance between the idea of how we came together as community and maybe how we no longer are together as community. So again, once we bowled in leagues, usually after work, but no longer. This seemingly small phenomenon symbolizes a significant social change that Robert Putnam has identified in the volume Bowling Alone, which the economists hailed as a prodigious achievement. And again, that was his premise, that decline in what he called the civic culture, what he called the decline in what is known as social capital. Now, when the bank first merged with AmSouth many, many years ago, and I believe I've shared this story before, the CEO that came to be our CEO in the newly merged entity was a gentleman by the name of Joe Carden. He was from Huntsville, Alabama, had been with AmSouth Bank for a long, long time. And Joe was quite a character. One of the things he told me when I first met him was that your main job is to keep me out of jail. As a human resource person, I said, okay, I hope I can do that. But in all seriousness, he was wonderfully, wonderfully civic minded. And his main charity, if you would, or main point of concern was the United Way. He was big in United Way in Huntsville and Alabama, came here and said, the bank is going to be a stalwart participant in United Way. We always had been as mid-state federal, but it kind of raised to another level. But he said, I'm not going to force that on you all necessarily. He told his executive team, but he said, what I am going to say is you're going to get involved in something that you care about in your community. And he said, I don't want you joining a board or an organization or anything else just to have, beef up your resume or have the bank's name as part of their organizational chart as far as their board of directors or volunteer or whatever. He said, I want you to do something that you really care about. And he called it paying your civic rent. And that stuck with me all these years later, paying your civic rent, as far as what we as what we as community members give back to our community. And that was obviously in the very secular world. So again, how does that apply to all of us in a church environment, in a religious environment? It's even more and more and more important. So again, we can do the next one, Mary Beth. His definition of social capital, which was one of the main premises of Bowling Alone, were connections among individuals, social networks, and the norms of reciprocity and trustworthiness that arise from them. And again, here's one of the quotes. As a rough rule of thumb, our evidence shows nearly half of all associational memberships in America are church-related. Half of all personal philanthropy is religious in character, and half of all volunteering in a religious context. And half of all volunteering occurs in a religious context. And he also said, statistically speaking, the evidence for the health consequences of social connectedness is as strong today as was the evidence for the health consequences of smoking at the time of the first Surgeon General's report on smoking. And again, that is really, really, really powerful. Now, I showed you the title of the cover of the Bowling Alone in the previous slide. He came out with a revised and updated edition on the 20th anniversary, which was in 2021. So even that was over 4 years ago. And the updated version still said that there was a decline in the participation rates of people in volunteer organizations, civic organizations. And those of you that are members, look around. It's the graying, not only the graying of America, but the graying of those organizations, the Rotarians, the Kiwanis, all of those, even to a certain extent, the United Way. You are seeing a surge of younger people, and we're saying, we're all getting older, we're ready to retire and whatnot. Where's the next generation coming up that's going to take on that task of those civic organizations, those cultural organizations? Because it is the graying of the civic sector as well. So that's what he's continuing to talk about. What we saw, the height of all of that participation in the civic culture occurred during the 50s and 60s. Obviously, the post-World War II generation, where the middle class was thriving, you saw that level of participation, that civic participation rise. And it peaked in around the mid-1960s, late 1960s, and then gradually over that time, that decline in participation. And he attributes, very, very many factors. When the book was first published, obviously the greatest thing was television. This was way before the internet when that book was the emergence of the internet to the extent that it is today, all that social media and whatnot that we have today. So think about, his vision in the 60s and 70s, and when it started to decline, was television. And look at the difference today, but what are the same impacts that we're facing today in that decline, perhaps exacerbated even more so by social media and what that does in terms of isolation. Do
we still have, I think some of the Rotary groups and like JCs, they've demised.
The JCs, I don't think have an active club here anymore. I heard a rumor that they were talking about resurrecting the local chapter. I can tell you that Rotary has a new footprint, if you will, called Impact Rotary. And it is a variation of Rotary, but you don't have to meet every week.
Yeah, that's the killer.
And that's the killer for so many people. It's a lot less reduction in cost. We don't have formal meetings. We meet and gather once a month, maybe. But it's a very, very new chapter. And the whole idea is to do service projects, whether they're service projects affiliated with another organization to which you belong and you want Rotary to help sponsor it. And it all is the idea of giving credit for that participation, but the idea is it's not that intense commitment of, and I don't know if it still works that way, but if you can't go on your normal day, you have to make it up and you can go to another club or something like, and it's very complicated, and a lot of people have to drop out because of work commitments, family commitments, or they just simply can't make that weekly commitment anymore, either physically or financially, because it's quite expensive. So
But I think we do have at least three
there's
Rotaries
they
in
are still very
Ocala. Yeah.
active. Yeah, they're still very active. And that's a very good thing. Putnam also wrote another book on the heels of Bowling Alone originally, called Better Together. And in that book, he celebrated the idea that, yes, while there may be a decline in the active participation in the civic culture, what was happening is individual communities and neighborhoods were coming together, either to say our children need a park, or we need a library, or whatever the case might be, or the roads are in horrendous shape and people are hitting potholes and getting flat tires. So they band together as individual communities to make a difference, but again, in that isolated individual community. So again, he was saying, yes, globally overall, but again, he's seeing pockets of that. And I think you're still seeing some of that today in terms of communities coming together. The neighborhoods are not as intense. I mean, growing up in New Jersey, in our neighborhood, those neighbors got together all the time, and they'd go to one party, everybody brings something, and then you go to another, and then the adults, always got together maybe on a Saturday night and somebody's basement or something, and they had a nice little party. But I mean, all the kids were taken care of because all the neighbors pitched in and helped out. You don't see that a lot anymore. And, especially in larger cities, even in suburbia, some of these big humongous subdivisions that are coming up, people may know a couple of their individual neighbors, but collectively as a neighborhood, maybe not so much anymore.
What is Join or Die, Barbara?
Join or Die is, I wanted to point that out. It is now streaming on
So
Netflix.
It's Mr. Putnam?
Yes, Mr. Putnam, yeah,
Ah.
it's Mr. Putnam's, yeah. So again, it's now streaming on Netflix, so, and again, his latest book is called The Upswing. And that basically is the history of civic engagement and involvement. How at the turn of the century and the last century, you had this upsurge after the probably after the Depression and whatnot, and people started to get involved. It reached its peak in the 60s, mid to late 60s, started the decline, but he's hopeful again that you may start to see another upswing. It's become very, very cyclical in terms of the history of this country and the nature of civic involvement. We talked about American Grace too, in one of the earlier programs that I did several years ago. But American Grace is a huge tome, and it's very, very data driven and very, very much statistical. But it was basically talking about the decline in religion, in formal people attending church services and whatnot across the board. And we've talked about that in a number of times in terms of the idea of the nuns, those that don't affiliate with any particular religious organization. And that is probably the largest growing sector of people when they're surveyed in terms of asking the question, what religious denomination do you affiliate with or do you associate with yourself with? And it's the same way, the largest group in terms of Democrat versus Republican, it's not that anymore. It's the independents and the NPAs, the non-party affiliations, especially here in Marion County. Over the years, you've seen that obviously a very, very upsurge in the number of Republicans, not so much in the Democratic side, The largest segment here, the largest growing segment is people that identify as independents or non-party affiliations. So again, it's kind of parallels in terms of some of that. So again, we talk about examples of social capital, and these are some that he cited on his website. You know, keep an eye on someone else's house while they're on vacation. Again, it was a very interesting one about the idea of the Hasidic Jews that trade in diamonds, especially there are districts in New York that's strictly doing that without trusting that those gems are pure, that they don't need to be tested. A barn raising on the frontier years ago was a very visual image of how that does. You know, email exchanges among a cancer support group. How many of us are involved in email groups or even Facebook groups or something that share back and forth information? Friendship networks, neighborhoods, churches, schools, and they said bridge clubs. How many of you belong to a bridge club these days? Book clubs, though, are another whole thing. There's a large participation.
My favorite is just having a gratitude buddy
Yeah.
and just doing that weekly. Just sending 3 gratitudes to each
3
other.
gratitudes, yeah. It's just reminders. It's just reminders. So, and again, he says even bars. The motto in Cheers, where everybody knows your name. That is a social connection. Whether you believe in alcohol consumption or not, but that camaraderie, that idea of being again captured again. And again, that comes from Putnam's website. He has what is called a social capital primer, and that all of that information was there. And again, from that as well, the next one, Mary Beth. And one more after that. Thank you. And these are some of the statistics that he wrote in the book. Joining and participating in one group cuts in half the odds of your dying next year. Every 10 minutes of commuting reduces all forms of social capital by 10%. Think about how much time you spend in your car, especially nowadays with as crazy busy as these roads are here in Ocala. It takes forever to get across town. It takes forever to get across town. We went out to Salt Lake City a number of years ago to see their light rail system. We were part of a delegation out of Orlando. And the light rail system originated in downtown Salt Lake City and went all the way to Provo, Utah, north of Salt Lake City. And it was funded, it was millions of dollars in the making, and it was funded predominantly by the Mormon Church. And they were our hosts, and they took us on an inaugural train route. That's the first time the train ever went that route through these beautiful subdivisions and whatnot. The trains are amazing. They're all wired and interconnected. Some of the major corporations, and there are some major national corporations headquartered in and around Salt Lake City and especially in Provo. And these major corporations said to their workers, if you take the train and commute and you log in to your laptop, your work laptop in the morning on the train on your way to work, counts as clocked in time, working hours. And so that was an incentive for people to do that. And we talked to a lot of people. They said, feel free. We talked to students, we talked to older people, we talked to retirees, we talked to people that were commuting, a little legitimately commuting. And by and large, every single one of them said, this has been a godsend, especially the people commuting, because they'd have to get in all that traffic and all that weather in Utah in the wintertime. And they said, I go in the morning I either read my paper or I do log in and get caught up before I get to the office. But they said on the way home, that's sacred time. And by the time I get home, I have decompressed and I am so relaxed that I can be there for my family. And I thought, yeah, that makes a lot of difference in terms of your commuting. And then when he gave that statistic, and watching commercial entertainment TV, and again, one would argue, and it's now live streaming on Netflix, so there you go. But the only leisure activity we're doing more of it is associated with lower social capital, and obviously we know that. Again, the trends over the last 25 years. Attending club meetings has dropped by 58%, family dinners by 43%. Having friends over, 35% drop. This is pre-COVID. This is not even COVID numbers. So again, we have this dichotomy of, again, where is our time going? How are we spending our time? Yet this idea of being able to give back to our communities and whatnot, the tension is there in terms of whether or not we crave more alone time. But again, the other dynamic at work is that loneliness, true definition of loneliness, is becoming more and more of an epidemic in this society today. Mary Beth, if we can go to the next one, please. Now, we all know our friend, Dr. Vivek Murthy, the twice former Surgeon General of the United States. All in Women International read his book Together. And the subtitle Together is The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World. And again, his quote in the interview that he gave to the LA Review of Books: loneliness exists in that gap between the social connection we need and the social connection we feel is available to us. He called loneliness the great masquerader, as it can appear in different forms such as anger, alienation, sadness, and a host of distressing emotional states. We can go to the next one, Mary Beth. When he was Surgeon General for the second time, they put together in 2023 a study, our epidemic of loneliness and isolation. It's an 82-page study that was put together by the Surgeon General. And some of the statistics in there are very, very startling. It, again, was driven by his book Together in terms of really recognizing how bad a situation this is. Obviously, 2023 is post-COVID. So we have to deal with the impact of that pandemic on all of us and what it did to all of our lives in terms of isolation. Some of us that are introverts by nature said, oh, okay, I can stay home, I can read, I can do this. But again, the heartbreak of that was that it was so awful for far too many of our fellow community members and our fellow citizens as a whole, because of the impact of the deaths and the suffering and the illness and everything else. So again, and again, people that lost their jobs, that lost their income because businesses shut down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, overarching, the impact was dramatic, not only here, but worldwide. So again, and again, here are some of his definitions from that study. Loneliness is far more than just a bad feeling. It harms both individual and societal health. It is associated with a greater risk of cardiovascular disease, dementia, stroke, depression, anxiety, and premature death. The mortality impact of being socially disconnected is similar to that caused by smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
We all know what happened with the smoking cessation programs and everything, all of the warnings that had to go on the cigarette packages from the Surgeon General. And quite frankly, I don't know people who smoke today, how they can afford it, because apparently it's wildly expensive. I don't know. But again, the correlation to say that loneliness, not just being alone by choice, but loneliness, the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So, given the profound consequences of loneliness and isolation, we have an opportunity and an obligation to make the same investments in addressing social connection that we have made in addressing tobacco use, obesity, and the addiction crisis. They're pretty profound things. If we fail to do so, we will pay an ever-increasing price in the form of our individual and collective health and well-being, and we will continue to splinter and divide until we can no longer stand as a community or a country. Instead of coming together to take on the great challenges before us, we will further retreat to our corners, angry, sick, and alone. That's not very uplifting. It's not very uplifting. But again, those are the dramatic parts of that. But again, if you think about it, how much of the polarization and whatnot has this idea of isolation contributed to the polarization? We're not talking, we're not dialoguing, we're not trying to, you read about the tragedy of an elderly person that lives alone not being found for days because there was no connection being made. There's no connection being made. I remember my late father was here with me for 6 years, and he insisted, he said, I'm not coming to live with you, dear, make the arrangements at Chambrel. You need your space, and so do I. And he was wonderful about that, but I went to see him every day, and he had a wonderful connection with his former Army unit in World War II. They used to get together, but as they aged, it got less and less. But they used to get together once a year, and different couples would host in their hometown. So they would travel all over the country. They went to West Point, they went to San Diego, they went to San Antonio, they went to Dearborn, Michigan, because somebody lived near the big Ford plant there. And but they would travel and they would stay in touch. And of course, this is the World War II generation. How did they stay in touch? Landlines. They did not use cell phones. But I left Dad one afternoon, and I got home and the phone rang. And all this voice said to me was, "Where the hell is your father?" Hello? Who is this? And he said, "This is Captain so-and-so and so-and-so. I have not heard from your father. I've tried to call him. He's not answering. Is he okay?" And I said, "Sir, yes, sir." I said, "I just left him. Why don't you try to call him now? He's there. I just physically left him." So I don't know whether he was dialing the wrong number or what the deal was, but I get this call going, "It's your father." And I'm going, "Who is this?" And I called my sister. I said, "Did you ever talk?" "Oh, that's Captain so-and-so." "Yeah, he's called me too." So again, but the point being, he checked up on my father. And that's a rarity and whatnot. And I will never forget that. But that was so funny. Because no preamble, no, "Hi, this is so-and-so, but where the hell is your father?" So anyway, but it's all good. It's all good. But again, as dismal as those statements from the Surgeon General sound, they came up with, Mayor Beth, if we can go to the next one, please. They came up with 6 pillars to advance social connection. And so these are the encouraging things, what you can do: strengthen social infrastructure in local communities, enact pre-connection public policies. There's a lot that can be done. Mobilize the health sector, reform digital environments, deepen our knowledge, and build a culture of connection. And again, they all have bullet points underneath them, and they're very hard to read here, but again, design the built environment to promote social connection, invest in local institutions that bring people together. What's happening in communities that bring people together? You know, we have festivals here that bring people together. You know, there are all kinds of things that can be done. But again, building that culture of connection. And again, in the environment we're in today, some of that seems to be on definite pause, but the idea being that those factors are out there for us to consider. So again, if we can go to the next one, Mary Beth. Our friend Diana Butler Bass. Again, we talked about the 10 W's, and she just finished the last one of wonder in her blog posts. And again, she started out her Lenten dialogue with the idea of the wilderness, and that's from scriptures, the wilderness. And she ended last Sunday, again, as the last Sunday in Lent before Palm Sunday today, with wilderness again, wonder and wilderness again. And again, one of her W's was the idea of being with others. And that's this whole idea of social connection. So we'll move on. Mary Beth, if you can go to the next one, please, for me.
What was her name, Barbara?
Pardon?
What was her name again?
Diana Butler Bass. She has an email that you can subscribe to, and a Substack called The Cottage. And again, in her Lent 5 on the wilderness, it was the song, quote from Isaiah, "I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." So again, in the wilderness, and this is from the wonderful Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, and he was talking about the idea of the wilderness. In the wilderness, where there is no empire or economy to sustain, we become beings in our own right, not troops or a workforce, man in the mass. We are no longer a number, but a person in the image of God. This Bamidbar, in the wilderness, Israel heard the I'm not certain how to pronounce the Hebrew. The one who reveals himself in words, and learn that God relates not only collectively to a nation, but to each individual as the one with a unique contribution to make into the life of the nation. And the way to the Holy Land lies through the wilderness. It is there that the Israelites learned what it is to build a society that will be the anti-type of Egypt, not an empire built on power, but a society of individuals of equal dignity under the sovereignty of God. So again, that idea of yes, we need to figure out what our wilderness is, and we come together here as a church community to delve into that idea of wilderness. And that beautiful quote from Isaiah, "I will make a way in the wilderness." So again, the idea of having to go through to get to the other side. The idea of having to get to the other side. Okay, Mary Beth, if you go to the next one, please.
Barbara,
Yes.
to get back to the loneliness,
Yes.
the other side of that, or the other face of that, is solitude.
Yeah.
And when
Yes.
you maybe
Yeah.
come up to it,
Yeah.
but
Go.
the
Go.
difference is kind of just a shift in mindset
Mhm.
sometimes.
Yes, it is.
And when you have this moment by yourself, you can do so many things, and you can commune with God, you can find out who to read, these sort of things. I've experienced both. I love the solitude. That was my star word, one of those.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah.
That's no coincidence, and that's what I was reading, the Dalai Lama, he has a book, 365 days, and I just
Yes.
opened it this morning. And it talked about isolation and loneliness,
Yeah.
but it talked about too, a lot of the reason why we get that way is when we're on a train and we're always just
Mhm.
doing our own thing and always just thinking about our own stuff and not saying hello, or I love your hair, or, you know, connecting a little bit. He says, you know, we'll be less isolated and feeling alone if we connect some when we're going, when we stop to. But like you said, Pam, that part is important too. To have both.
yeah. Yeah, you need both. Yeah, but that's the dichotomy. That's what we're trying to deal with is, you know, are we alone by choice and enjoying that blessed solitude? Or is it truly, you know, and sometimes it just, it happens sometimes just very gradually. You don't necessarily realize it. You know, talk to people, for example, that maybe have been very active and whatnot, but they have an accident or something happens that they're incapacitated for a while physically, you know, whether they fell or whatever have you. And that isolation sets in.
Or they're
Then almost
small styles.
the small thing, and then it becomes a habit. And then it becomes a habit, and then, you know, so that spiraling starts. So, again, the idea. So, again, our friend Michelle Obama, she and her brother Craig, she's a Robinson, by the way.
Yeah.
That's the same last name as my maiden name. Anyway, they have this wonderful new podcast called Higher Ground IMO. And I've got to tell you, I had to look up IMO. I said, what in the world is IMO? Well, you know, what kind of acronym is that? Anybody know? That's the one, in my opinion, yes. And I've seen it on people that shortcut little emails or Facebook posts or something. They'll go, IMHO in my humble opinion. But I saw the IMO and I didn't make the connection right away. I had to like, what is the IMO? I said, okay, in my opinion. So again, she and Craig had an interview with Jay Shetty, whose wonderful book is called Think Like a Monk. And again, he said in the interview, no one is meant to live life alone. And when times get tough, we shouldn't be afraid to reach out to our community and support systems. As Jay Shetty said, asking for help isn't a sign of weakness, it's the ultimate sign of strength. Most people genuinely want to be of service to others, and more often than not, reaching out only reinforces your relationships. But again, in this very individualistic society that we have become, we are all very reluctant to ask for help. And I remember years ago, and I think I've shared this story before, one of my dear friends said to me, because I was juggling, trying to get, you know, as a single parent, getting Joseph to school, and if the daycare situation blew up or he was sick and I'm going, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I figured I had to muscle through this alone. It's my responsibility. I had to do this. And I remember one of my dear friends saying, Barbara, don't you realize that by your not asking us for help, you are denying us the benefit of being your friend and helping you and serving you. And wow, that stuck with me too, because again, not realizing it. So, and I know people can take it to extreme, but again, but in all seriousness, we are often too reluctant to say, I need help. I need help. And that's really, really, really important, especially those of us that were taught that it's important to be individualistic and to take care of yourself. So again, the next one, please, Mary Beth. Now, another favorite of mine is David Brooks. Now, David Brooks writes for the New York Times, but he's a very conservative columnist. And he's written a number of books. The latest one is called How to Know a Person, the Art of Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Seen. Again, in this environment of isolation And, you know, we're always on our phones looking down and whatnot and not connecting with people in any way, shape, or form. He said, being open-hearted is a prerequisite to being a full, kind, and wise human being, but it is not enough. People need social skills. We talk about the importance of relationship, community, friendship, social connections, but these words are too abstract. The real act of, say, building a friendship or creating a community involves performing a series of small, concrete social actions well, disagreeing without poisoning the relationship, revealing vulnerability at the appropriate pace, being a good listener, knowing how to end a conversation gracefully, knowing how to ask for and offer forgiveness, knowing how to let someone down without breaking their heart, knowing how to sit with someone who is suffering, knowing how to host a gathering where everyone feels embraced, knowing how to see things from another's point of view. And that is so vitally important. That is kind of a synopsis of what that whole book is about. But again, that importance of communication and dialogue. The next one, Mary Beth. Another favorite of mine is Francis Collins. Dr. Francis Collins wrote the book, The Language of God. And Dr. Francis Collins' team, when he ran the National Institute of Health, their team cracked the genome code. Not a small feat by any stretch. Pam, how many spiral? How many of them? There's hundreds of them that they saved their team, and he headed the team that cracked the genome code. So again, a pure scientist, but a scientist who believes. And he wrote this wonderful new book called The Road to Wisdom, and it's called On Truth, Science, Faith, and Trust. And how do you merge all of them together? And he came up with this idea that of what he called the Road to Wisdom Pledge. And again, there are certain parts of that, that really are very, very powerful, especially in this climate that we're in today. I will actively seek out opportunities to engage in dialogue with those who have different views from mine. And that is very hard to do. That is very hard to do because in your own families, sometimes you just agree that we are just not going to talk about this. Simply not going to talk about it.
But you also know that you're right and they're wrong.
Well, of course, but and they think the same thing, so there you go. But again, this idea, I will bring a generous spirit to all my interpersonal interactions, refusing to ascribe evil intentions to others simply because of different political or societal beliefs. I will be slow to take offense. Loving my neighbor will be my goal. And that is pretty powerful stuff. How many of you have heard of Braver Angels? You know Braver Angels? Yes, we know Braver Angels. And he cites them as an example in the text. And I did attend several of their online forums, and they pair specifically Democrats and Republicans, and they have this conversation back and forth. It was really some very, very interesting conversations. I got to admit, I believe most of us were either very moderate Democrats or very moderate Republicans, but the dialogue was very entertaining because people had their specific views, and you give credit for the courage of people to kind of step into those. They facilitate breakout groups. They're from all over the country and whatnot. They're all free. You can just go online to Braver Angels and look at their different curriculums that are available.
I think like Marshall Rosenberg's work, because I'm rereading some of those books, and he
Rosenberg,
talks
yeah.
about not teaching in
Yeah.
school right or
Yeah.
wrong.
Nonviolent communication,
Yeah.
yeah.
So are they similar to that?
No, it's not teaching nonviolent, it's the idea of establishing a dialogue
Okay.
with people who think differently than you do, so, yeah. But again, those are very, very enlightening at times, so, I encourage you, and the fact that he referenced braver angels was really, really quite interesting.
My question in that regard is how do you find the common ground though, because you're dealing with a different set of, I can't say facts, you're dealing with different realities.
Mhm. They don't attempt to change anyone's mind. But they just attempt to have people air their differences in a way that's meaningful dialogue. So why do you feel this way, or what is your impression on that? And you get more into that in the little mini breakout sessions, because there's only like maybe a handful of people in those chat rooms when they break out the larger groups, so. But yeah, they're not intending to come to any major solutions but just to start the dialogue. It's to start to air the differences in a cordial setting.
I've experienced that too. My husband and I are total opposites. He's introverted, I'm very, me first, I'm gonna take care of my stuff first, and he's always accusing me of always doing things for others. That's why my things don't get done, so I call it othering. So when I'm othering, God gives me the grace and helps me take care of my stuff. So that it still gets done in the long run,
Yeah.
but it's just not the way you would think it would be done.
Yeah, yeah. I know, and we all probably have those stories in one way, shape, or form, so, again. All right, we'll go to the next one, Mary Beth. Now, Dr. Collins wrote the foreword to this marvelous book called Music and Mind that was edited by the wonderful Renee Fleming. Fabulous opera soprano, so, and I'm sure if you've ever heard Renee sing, it's just extraordinary, but she was most recently on the advisory council for the Kennedy Center and resigned after number 47 took over as chairman. And she and many, many others, but nonetheless, Music and Mind is all about the healing power of the arts and music in particular. It's a series of essays by people from all walks of life, from scientists and physicians and those in the arts community themselves. It's a huge tome, and you have to kind of split it up into it's to be about that thick. But anyway, she came to do that, and Dr. Collins wrote the introduction, or the foreword rather, and the reason he did was that when he was still with NIH, the director of NIH, he and his wife were invited to a party in Washington, D.C. that Renee Fleming was in attendance, as was Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Judge Anthony Scalia, and among other dignitaries and people of importance, right? So, and Dr. Collins said, I'm sitting there going, oh, why did they invite me? But nonetheless, after dinner, they went outside and they had a performer who was playing guitar, and they ultimately asked Dr. Collins to join them, because Dr. Collins is a guitarist and sings folk songs and Americana songs and whatnot. And they were singing and performing, and Renee Fleming came up, and he did not know who she was, and said, you know, let's all join in together, and you know, we'll be all better, we'll all sing together and whatnot. And started to sing all these wonderful Americana songs, and he later found out that she's a soprano, you know, and sings opera and all of this kind of stuff. And here she is singing regular American tunes. And the Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Judge Scalia were all participating as well. this happened the weekend after the Supreme Court made the decision to legalize gay marriage. And Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg were on polar opposite sides of that question. And it didn't matter because they all came together in that environment. And that made such an impression on Dr. Collins that again, he became involved with her when they were putting together this wonderful book on music and mind. And he highlights that story in the foreword to that book that he wrote for her, which I thought was really, really extraordinary. And one of the concluding essays in the book is by one of my favorites, Yo-Yo Ma, cellist. And if you've seen any of Yo-Yo Ma's work recently, he did the Silk Road series, which he traveled all over the world to these remote places and played in these remote places. One of his latest last summer was literally in one of the caves in Kentucky. One of those really underground with the stalactites and everything else. They lit it up. He performed in the cave to an audience in the cave, which I think was extraordinary. And again, he has done a lot in terms of that connection to music, nature, individuals, the environment, our responsibilities there and whatnot. Again, this idea of connection to the greater world and the greater environment. And again, this is an excerpt from the essay that he wrote at one of the concluding essays in that book. And it says, we humans have been cultural beings since our beginnings. Our creations are the tools we have for making sense of our most basic relationships with the world around us, with one another. Culture helps us not only to understand one another and connect to the transcendent, but also to make sense of our place in the natural world and our responsibilities toward it. It codes our consciousness. It creates some form of order from chaos. It helps us create narratives that navigate our path forward and restore our sense of belonging in and responsibility to the world around us. And again, and I'll send, Mary Beth will send this out to all of you, but again, the blue excerpt there, Music and Mind, live with Renee Fleming. It is an entire free series on that website from the Kennedy Center Festival series, the series of 19 essays, interviewing and having conversations with all of the different authors and the different people that participated in those essays in Mind and Music. It's a stunning piece, but it's on there. It's on the web, on that link there on their website, all 19, and free to just click on and read. And I sincerely doubt you're going to see something like that. I hate to editorialize, but in the future, that does not bode well for what we're going to see. The next one, Mary Beth. I'm going to conclude now with a couple of things. Our friend Joshua Major is the choral conductor for the Ocala Symphony Orchestra Chorus. He is a marvelous musician, singer. He teaches music. He is the music minister at a Presbyterian church in Jacksonville, Florida. It's a new position for him. He was formerly with the Lutheran Church in Gainesville. I can't remember the name of it now. But anyway, he is a music minister as well. And he just wrote a wonderful little book, a series of essays called Stillness in the Turning. And that's what Pam was talking about in terms of solitude and stillness. And I've chosen two excerpts from two of the essays very, very quickly. The one is called Table. Tables are also places of equality. Around them, everyone has a seat, each person sharing the same level, the same space. Maturity lies in this leveling and learning to value others not by their position, but by their presence. A table reminds you that the most meaningful exchanges happen not in hierarchy, but in community. And the second excerpt is from a essay called Others. In the end, maturity with others is not about harmony, but about integrity. It is the willingness to meet others as they are and allow them to change you in return. It is the quiet strength of knowing that love, whether in friendship, family, or partnership, is not a cage, but a shared horizon, always growing wider. Mary Beth, if you'll advance probably two more, because we're running out of time. I'll give you some blessings from my friend John O'Donoghue and Adam Kara. May you be blessed with good friends. And then this one, one more back, Mary Beth. The one before it. Whoops. Well, I'm going to give you a charge, and this is called a Franciscan. Oh, there it is. It's called a Franciscan blessing. It says Franciscan blessing, but it's not by St. Francis. It was written by a Benedictine nun by the name of Sister Ruth Marlene Fox. She just recently passed away at the wonderful age of 87 years young. And again, this is a blessing for all of us that I'll leave you with today. May God bless you with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and to turn their pain to joy. And may God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in the world, so that you can do what others claim cannot be done, to bring justice and kindness to all our children and the poor. So again, the last thing I want to share with you, if you have not seen Come From Away, you need to avail yourself of Come From Away. Do you know the story of Come From Away? Very quickly. Come From Away is the story of Gander, Newfoundland.
Oh, that is a great story.
On 9/11, they closed all the airspace worldwide. And those planes had to be diverted and landed now somewhere. 38 planes wound up, mostly overseas flights, coming back to the United States, wound up landing in Gander, Newfoundland. Gander, Newfoundland had a huge air base that was used during World War II because they couldn't get the planes with carrying supplies and troops across the water because the fuels weren't that, they didn't have the fuel capacity. So they would have to stop in Gander to refuel before they made the flights over to England and Europe. And so that airfield still exists. It's very large. It accommodated a lot of people during World War II. But Gander, Newfoundland, is a town of about 9,000 people. And they landed 38 planes in Gander on 9/11 from all over the world, all different airlines. There were approximately 7,000 people on those planes who had to be housed, fed, clothed. They couldn't take the luggage off the plane. And Gander and the community surrounding Gander opened their hearts, their homes, their spaces, fed, clothed, made sure service was available, because this is there wasn't a lot of self-service still existing then. And this is the musical version of Come From Away. And they called the folks that landed that come from away as the plain people. The musical is extraordinary. It's streaming now live on Apple TV for those of you that have Apple TV. But again, one of the iconic songs on there is Somewhere in the Middle of Nowhere, in the middle of who knows where, you found your heart and left a part of you behind. It is a cast of 12 people on a minimalist stage with Celtic music in the background playing. And the 12 people play all the parts. They play the townspeople, they play the plain people, they play the pilots, they play everybody in the world. And it is one of the most extraordinary things I have ever heard. But again, the idea of unity and connection. strangers and they welcomed the stranger, who were fearful, who didn't know what their loved ones were going through, it was just an extraordinary thing. And it's based on the book, The Day the World Stopped. And these two people wrote this marvelous musical of 12 people. And just as a little preview, the Palace Civic Theater is going to close its 75th season with Come From Away. So
Okay, I didn't notice.
stay tuned. Stay
All
tuned.
right, great.
So, blessings to you all this Palm Sunday.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, thank you. I wanted to just make a couple of quick announcements. Next week, Easter Sunday, we're gonna do, we've done this thing, coffee and conversation a few times, because there were a lot of people, when we surveyed people, they wanted time to actually have some dialogue and more discussion. So it's Easter Sunday, it's gonna be real casual. Anybody that wants to help, I'm gonna make a egg, breakfast casserole. If you want to do some fruit or something, I'll send a note out to all the Crossroads people. But what I want you to be thinking of is we've had some great programs and speakers and been inspired to try some different things and think about some different things. So we'll do it in a big, rectangular kind of dialogue space, and we can Zoom it, but I encourage you, that may be a small group because it's Easter, but we'd love for everybody to come and just have a great sense of community, as we've been talking about just now. And then I'll get out an updated schedule. We're going to have, starting with Gwen. If you haven't seen Gwen teach, she's phenomenal. Gwen, you want to just quickly tell them what your topics?
Well, the topic was given to me, and it's a water.
Yeah, so it's Earth Week, so Earth Day, Earth
Water
Week
is what I'm going to be
talking about. And then,
The water you're gonna talk about?
and then Susan's, and I'll send this out to you. Susan's following her, and you sent me a note on it.
Yeah, that was my working title, and I think it's still viable. Seeking intimacy with God's creation. It's a little different from God's awesome creation that we preceded with, but it's gonna be a chance for us to think about certain ways that the Spirit of God speaks to us through nature, and mostly dialogue and storytelling about experiences that we've had and hearing the voice of God in unexpected places, being surprised by God.
Sounds good. Then Kathy's not here. I gotta make sure she can do May 11th, but she's gonna do something conservation oriented, I think maybe on Rivers Springs, but, and then the 18th, I've been trying to get Sheena to help me with this. I want to do something on kind of around the theme. Joanne and I heard Doug Tommy's and Judith speak up in South Carolina about his newest book, Nature's Best Hope, and it's about the importance of native plant gardening and things. And then one schedule we ended on the 18th has been suggested we might run one more week, which would be May 27th. We took out my program because we wanted desperately to we really wanted to hear from John last week on his Sudan thing. But if people are interested in going to the end of May, I was doing something on the intersection between science and health and religion, and there's a lot. In fact, Barbara just told me share some other things. Been reading a couple of books that talk about that, and would be glad to do that if there's interest. It kind of jumps around. We have a 4-part series, kind of environmental related, and then we kind of come back to what we've been talking about. But y'all interested, I'll do that, and I'll send it the updated schedule out to y'all. And then we'll be in, Barbara's gonna be leading a book discussion. She and I need to talk about dates, but we want to give you a little bit of time on that. And then the book, Mary Beth's gonna get everybody together to discuss summer book club and what books you would like to read. And then Susan's got a great thing in mind for the summer. You want to share that real briefly?
Yes, last year we did, a 6-week or 8-week, discussion of John Philip Newell's book, Rise to the Cults of the Scouts. And, this time we're gonna do his latest book, which is The Great Search. That's what we are searching for, both secularly and, also spiritually. And he's a very powerful, insightful writer, and thankfully we'll enjoy that.
So lots coming up. Appreciate y'all coming on this Palm Sunday, and hopefully some of y'all will be able to come back next week, because I think the discussion times we've had pretty good turnout and great discussion. And if you're like me, you've been immersed in chaos, maybe this is the week to think about, what have we been talking about? Is there one thing I can put in play? I do want to ask a personal favor of all y'all to say a prayer for me and the folks that have been working on the Ocklawaha River stuff. We are actually in the Senate budget that can come in and out. We haven't put that out. We did put that out to the news this week. We kind of put a light on it. We're hoping that it's going to be added to the House budget, but it'll be a roller coaster for the next few weeks. So just keep us in mind and pray that we put that river back where God intended it to be.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Beth. Hope you feel better.
Thank you. I appreciate your indulgence.